Okay. I'm sorry that I'm so late. I didn't even have a chance to test the audio, so I'm going to have to hope that it works. Okay. We are on Daf Gimel of Sanhedrin. We're learning about the makor of how we know the different batadinim need different sizes. And the Mishnah makes two categories out of dinim omnis, because it says echad dinim omnis, and then it says dinik zelos v'chavolos. The Gemara wanted to know, why is it that the Tana is mentioning two categories? So at first the Gemara said it's because the Gemara wants to specifically exclude some types of dinim omnis, which are haidos v'alvois. So the Gemara made two categories of dinim omnis: haidos v'alvois, which means if a malva is making a claim against a loiva, there you would not require mumchin, although you would require 3 dayanim, you wouldn't require mumchin. Our Mishnah is referring to dayanim mumchin, and our Mishnah is only referring to gzelos v'chavalos. And the Gemara wanted to know, why would you? So the Gemara wanted to know, when the Torah teaches us that you need 3 dayanim, what parsha of the Torah is the Torah talking about? So the Gemara told us that it's in Parshas Mishpatim, when the Torah is teaching us about Shomrin, that's where the Torah tells us the halacha of 3 dayanim. So the Gemara probes, when the Torah was talking about Shomrin, in that parsha, is there also a direct reference made to Havois? Because it does say in that parsha, Ad sheyomer ki huzeh, which is what we always explain as meaning moide b'mitzas, which is what would trigger a shvua in the case of a malva and a loiva. So if you hold that ira parsha shanukan, meaning even though the Torah is talking about shomrim in the parsha where it tells us about the yodim, but there's an injection of one word, that's one phrase that's out of place, that's directly referencing halvois. And therefore, midaraisa, halvois have the same requirement in what type of bezdin you need as gzelos and chavolos. So, for the Gemara, if in fact midaraisa, halvois requires the same type of bezdin, so why is it that our Mishnah is trying to insinuate that haidos halvois, when it comes to issues between a malva and a loiva, there we shouldn't need mumcha? So the Gemara said it was because of a takana. And Reb Chanina references a takana about drisha v'chakira. Normally, every type of din requires drisha v'chakira, meaning we have to scrutinize and challenge the edim to make sure that their stories are 100% consistent. And any discrepancy found in between the testimony of the two edim will disqualify them. That extra level of scrutiny, Zok Reb Chanina, does not apply to halachas between a malva and a loiva, and the reason was kedei shaloi tinol delas b'fnei lovin. If a malva knows that in the event that the loiva doesn't want to pay him back, he's going to have to struggle to find edim that will withstand the greatest level of scrutiny, he'll be discouraged in the first place from ever making a loan, because he's going to think to himself, it's going to be very difficult for me to be able to prove in Bezdin, in fact, that this loiva borrowed money from me. So forget the whole thing. That's why there's no drisha v'chakira on those edim. So our Gemara is continuing that theme and saying, not only don't you make drisha and chakira on edim, even the dayanim that you pick don't have to be dayanim mumchin. To find dayanim mumchin would be very difficult. So the malva might say to himself, I don't want to lend money, and then I'm going to have to find dayanim mumchin. We don't have a proper bezdin around. It's going to be a big pain. So therefore, I'd rather not lend money at all. Therefore, the Chazal relaxed the quality of people that you need to be a dayan, and you could take shloisha joitos. You can have 3 regular people. Now that'll be very easy to find. So that means the malva will say, I'm not concerned about getting my money back in the event that the loiva doesn't want to pay me. First of all, I can put a bezdin together quite easily, and second of all, they're not going to go hard on my edim. Now already there's a reasonable expectation I'll be able to get it back. Now I'm going to be happy to lend money. But Zok Gemara,
What is the definition of a hedget exactly? I mean, he would have to know the halachas and have
correct.
to be clear in them. If it's
So
not,
you're
they're
asking, how could
useless.
you allow hedyotos if no one knows halacha? So where's this law coming from? The Gemara is going to end up saying you will need one mumcha. You can have one mumcha with two hedyotos.
Okay.
Which is often, I shouldn't, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but most of the Dinei Torah that I went to, out of the three Rabbanim that are there, only one of them is really a mumcha or a musmach in Choshe Mishpat. The other two are just there as sidekicks, as I call them. So they're not Yoshvei Krolis, that not. Of course not, they're not Yoshvei Krolis. But like in every Din Torah that I ever went to, either Rabbi Loi was the Choshe Mishpadayin, or Rabbi Shoichet was the Choshe Mishpadayin. Yoshvei means lady games. People sit around the party in the bar. Right. The Gemara is going to introduce that later. Yeah. So I don't know if that's because of this, but I do know that many Dinei Torah that I went to, many out of the five that I went to, some as a guest, some as a participant, there was always one Rav who was clearly dominant, and he always had in the middle. And then on either side of him were Rabbanim from the city, but not Rabbanim that are known to be people who paskin on Choshe Mishpat. Okay, Ella Me'ata. There is a rule that a bezdin, if they're legitimate, they're indemnified from having to pay for a mistake that they made. But if we're telling us now that a hedget can be a legal dayan, so then he's indemnified. And therefore, Elamayata to lo yishalmu. Now, if they make a mistake, they're not going to have to pay, as Rashi says. And here's a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos how to understand this line. Elamayata to lo yotos b'dinei momenis lo yishalmu. They wouldn't have to pay. You know why? Even the Bershus Rabbanon Konachsi, since they took on this responsibility with a proper authorization, Havalu Kamumchin, we treat them like Mumchin, meaning they're indemnified. If you're a real dain and you made a mistake, you're part of paying. If you have no business being on the bezdin and you paskin, and because of that you cause damage, you got to pay. So Zok to Gemara, there's two ways to understand this next line. El Mayata Tola Yishalmu, is that what you're saying? Zok to Gemara, no. Because Zok to Gemara, if Tola Yishalmu, then Kol Shkein Atanoil Delos B'fnei Lachim. And Rashi learns that's not going to help by allowing Kedyoitis, because if they don't have to pay for their mistakes, for sure Amava won't want to lend money. Because how do I know that I'm going to get a proper guy who knows what he's doing, and that's going to paskin on this case properly? So this is a challenge to that svara, which the Gemara doesn't answer. So let's see the Rashi. Kol shekain shatanoel delos the sover dilma to beidina. The bezdin might made a mistake, upatuli, and there'll be no recourse. Umafsidan, I'm going to lie. So that's going to be a big problem. I'm not going to want to lend money because I'm not going to get justice, which is a little bit of a kasha on using Reb Chanina. How could you say that we're relaxing mumkin? That's going to have the opposite effect of what Chanina wanted. Tosfos has actually a different approach, and he says, Ela Mayata Tola Yishalmu. So I'm on the third Tosfos on the Omid. Pirish Bekuntris, the way Rashi just learned, is given the Beshuska Avdi, since they have permission to sit on such an entire, we're going to treat any mumcha like a mumcha, and we're going to indemnify. But the Lashon Kol Shekain Shatanoil seems to be saying for carrot. It seems to be saying Kol Shekain that we have to allow it, because if not, the Malv is not going to lend money. It's mashma that it's not a kasha on this svara, it reinforces the svara. And therefore, ein misyashiv, to understand the Gemara's expression of Kol Shekain Shatanoil, which seems to be reinforcing our argument, doesn't really fit in, because in fact it's going against our argument. If you're going to say that a non-mumcha can paskin, imkain, you're still going to be slamming the door in front of a loiva. Elamashmi loshen kol shekain, the mikoich neilas delas, the loya v'porach. I'm sorry, have a part. The Mikoyach Delos, the Ilus Delos have a part. For carrot. We're asking from the Ilus Delos itself. And this is how we should understand this line of the Gemara. Even the Chayshis Tolinis Delos, since you are concerned about Ilus Delos, that a Malva won't want to lend money, Havalon Meimar, To Lo Yishalmu. We should actually indemnify. We should indemnify these dayanim. So that's the Gemara's kasha. They should be indemnified. You know why? If you're not going to indemnify these dayanim who are not up to par, we were trying to say that we'll make it easier for the malva to collect because we'll make it easier for him to find dayanim. But if these dayanim know that they're not indemnified because they're not mumchin, no one's going to want to sit on the entire. You're only asking for trouble. So therefore, that was Gemara's kasha. And therefore, kol shekain, if they do have to pay, kol shekain, that you'll be noel delos. So the Gemara is saying, in fact, we will allow non-mumchin to sit on bezdin and we'll indemnify them, and then it'll be easy to find the diet. In time of fact, my kushya haloi mechayev l'shalom elim kain notal v'nosam b'yad kidu amar be'echadinim amnis. Later on in the Masechta, in the parak, the Gemara is going to teach us that when a dayan paskins wrongfully and causes one person to lose, he's not mechuyev to pay. At the most, it's a garmi, it's a grama, unless he himself took the money from the person who he was mechayev and gave the money to the person he pattered. That would constitute an action on his part. So, regardless, there's no liability. So, what's this whole discussion here? There's a mandam who holds that the dayan would be chayiv just for issuing the psak, and that's what we're saying. In fact, we would have to indemnify these dayanim, because if we didn't, it'll be just as hard to find a dayan. Strike the Gemara. I don't like this pshat that we're saying from Rabbi Chanina, because ihachi, as the Rashi says, ihachi de behaydois valvois shloisha beina. If you hold, you taka need 3, but not mumchin. La malela rabavolu kumala masnisin b'mahin katani. If in fact you do need 3 mumchin, so why is it that we're explaining the first 2 clauses of the Mishnah is dine mamanis ni dayan mumchin? What type of dine mamanis? Gezelos v'chavalos. It would have been so much simpler to say there's 2 classes of dine mamanis. Standard dine mamanis, which needs a bezin of 3, but not mumchin. So that's echad dine mamanis. And echad gezelos v'chavalos could be referring to gezelos v'chavalos that require 3 dayanim and mumchin. So let's say that there's actually 2 separate halachas that the Mishnah is referring to. Yachi tarti katani, dine mamanos b'shloisha joitos, referring to Haidois Valvois, and Gzelos V'chavalos b'shloisha mumchin. And Gzelos V'chavalos also need shloisha, but they need shloisha mumchin. V'hoid, another kasha we have is shloisha lomali. If you're learning like Rebbe Vo, that all the Mishnah is talking about is only Gzelos V'chavalos, and the Mishnah is saying Dine Mamanis, what type of Dine Mamanis? Gzelos V'chavalos. So why does it say Dine Mamanis b'shloisha? Gzelos v'chavalos b'shloisha. It should have just said it once, which I think was your kasha right when we started. Ella Amarava Zokrava. You know what it's saying? It's really 2 different cases. In fact, that is correct. That for Haidois Valvois you need 3 dayanim without mumchin, and for Gzelos v'chavalos you need 3 that are mumchin, and that's exactly what the Mishnah is telling us. Ella Amarava Tarti Gitani. In fact, it's 2 different cases. We should Rabbi Chanina. So that is pshat. Echad in the Mamanis is referring to Haidois Valvois. We need shloisha joit when you need shloisha joitos because of Rabbi Chanina, shloisha dos b'fnei lovin, and echad gzelos v'chavalos requires shloisha mumchin. Gewaltig. Rabbi Acha berei the Rabbi Ika, Rabbi Acha the son of Rabbi Ika, Amar as follows: Midayraisa chad nami kosher. Midayraisa really only 1 dayan is enough. You don't need to have 3 dayanim. Shenemar, it says in the pasuk with a singular tense, v'tzedek tishpoit amisecha, which is we're talking to 1 dayan. So in fact, 1 dayan is good enough to paskin. Ella, so why is it that you need 3? Mishum yoshvei kronos, because we don't want any old schlepper to officiate on a bezdin. Let's see the Rashi. Midaraisa chadna mikosher b'hidav alva. Dichsiv tishboit loshen yachid. And really, ain't there a parsha yishanuka? Let's say that when the Torah talks about 3 dayanim, we're not injecting any information about hidosh valvois. And the kiyuzeh mentioned in the parsha of Shomer is to tell you that even in the parsha of Shomer, you need a moitiv mitzvahs. And our Mishnah is saying echad din imamnis b'shloisha and echad gelas v'chavolos b'shloisha. Umiu shloisha by dois balvois lav midaraisha el midarabon. So maybe in fact you do need 3 dayanim even for hadois valvois, but maybe that's midarabonon. Yet midaraisa 1 would be enough. What's the gzera? If the Torah said 1's enough, why were the chachamim? Why are they up to ante and require 3 dayanim? Zokt Rashi, the second to the bottom skinny line, Gzera mishum yoshvei kranayos, Tagorin, merchants, she'ein bekin betivdinim, they don't know chosh mishpat well. And they're gonna ruin the halacha. Because v'yiskas achayiv, they might wrongfully exonerate somebody who should have been paying. V'yichayiv is a zakai. So Zokt Gemara, and if you have 3, how does having 3 help you? You could still have yoshvei kranayos. Yoshvei kranayos are not that difficult to come by. The less behuchad the gomer. If you have 3, someone's going to have to know something. The gomer sheshama mechachamim umedayin halachas din umedayonim halachas din umilva. There must be somebody. If you only take 1, the likelihood is you're going to find a yoshvei kranayos. But if you find 3, chances are one of them is going to be good. So that's why the Midat Kohen should have 3, because hopefully one of them will be legit. Correct the Gemara, Elamayata Tola Yushalmu, which is a similar kasha to we just had earlier, where there was a difference between Rashi and Tosfos, how to understand it, and here we'll have the same thing. Imkain Tola Yushalmu, the dayanim shouldn't have to pay; they're indemnified. Kolshakain the nefishi yoshvei karanos. So surely there'll be many more yoshvei karanos they don't have to pay. And once again, we're going to have a problem that people are going to feel like their dinei Torah are not being adjudicated properly. Zok to Rashbam, I'm Zok to Rashi. I keep on making that mistake. Toilo yishalmu dabrishus nachsi afilu midaraisa. Right, even midaraisa they're going b'shus. You only need 1/8. You only need 1 dime. People aren't even going to care if it's official that you can have yoshvei kranos. It'll be a bigger problem if they're indemnified. There'll be a bigger problem with more yoshvei kranos than typical. Even the third one, all 3 will be yoshvei kranos because nobody's going to be interested in learning. So how is that going to help? Tosfos has a different approach. Tosfos says, "Kol sheken dinefishi yoshvei kranos gam kan zok Tosfos parach mich koyach zeh." The kasha is as follows: even the chayshes to yoshvei kranos, since you're concerned that there's too many yoshvei kranos around, havalon lemeimar to lo yishamu. We would have to say to lo yishamu. You know why? Kidei shelo yisrachak hanu de gemiri. Yes, if you all told yishalmu, so no, even the people who are learned aren't going to want to paskin. Even though I'm learned and I am illegally going and technically I'm indemnified, but once such a bezdin can be held accountable, even the mumchim, they're not going to be interested. The ozi yevsher the leka chad the gomer and if you're going to charge them, then nobody's going to want. No one's going to want, and it's going to be very hard to find anybody. Umashani calls again the nefishi. You'll have many more people that will line up because they won't have to pay. Calls again the nefishi lachain yishalmu. Let them pay kidei shilumudu dine mamanis, so that they should learn shloyitu, that they shouldn't make a mistake. Pen yischai v'l'sham. Okay, so zok the heilige gemara weiter. Calls again the nefishi yoshvei kranos. So zok the gemara. We have now 2 pshatim in our Mishnah. Either midaraisa you need 3 dayanim, and midarabanan they relaxed that you don't need mumchin. That was Rav's pshat. And then we had the second pshat that we had from Rav Acha Bered Ravika, that midaraisa you only need 1 dayan for Dinei Mamonis, and Midarabanan we require 3 because of the problem Yosy covers. So is there a halacha l'maisa difference? Because at the end of the day, you still need 3 dayanim. Mi'ika ben Rava l'Ravacha b'Rei Ravika. So there's a very fundamental difference between them, and that is the halacha of Shmuel. Lama Shmuel Shnaim Shadanu Dineim Din El Shenikru Bezin Chotz. Shmuel holds, even though you need to have a bezin of 3, if 2 people decided to paskin to take on a case of Choshen Mishpat, their din is valid. But to consider the bezin chotzav, how dare you think that you could be a dayan when you know you need to have 3 dayanim? So Shmuel says that the din Torah is valid. L'Rava Leslie, according to Rava, it cannot be valid because the Daraisa says you need to have 3 dayanim, and if you don't, it's an invalid psak. So L'Rava Leslie did the Shmuel, but L'Ravacha B'Rei Ravika, where midaraisa even 1 dayan would have been enough, it's definitely a good psak din. It's just that if you don't listen to the Rabbanon and you don't have 3 dayanim, it's called a bezin chotzav. Therefore, islay the Shmuel. So that's the nafkamina. How, if you whether you hold a Shmuel or not, will dictate how you understand our Mishnah. Zok ahead of the Gemara weiter. The next case.
Well, what is the basis of the machlokas? Is it one man the Amr says that a drasha is not considered a deraisa? Is that?
No, I think that the whole machlokas is totally in if you say Erev Parshi Shanukan, and that is when the Torah inserts the phrase Ad Sheyomer Ki Yuzeh in the Parsha of Shomron. Is that referring to Shomron, or is that referring to a regular Malvin Aloyga? If you hold that the Torah injected here something that has nothing to do with the sugya of Shomron, the Torah is referring to Malvin Loiva, so then midaraisa, you need 3 dayanim, because that's the parsha where the Torah taught us you need 3 dayanim. But if you learn it's not only of parshas, Nachir Mekuzeh is talking about Hilcha Shomron, and the Torah, when it tells us about 3 dayanim, is not at all addressing regular halvois and haidois. So then, where do you know anything about a standard bezdin? That we know from a different pasuk of B'tzedek Tishbar Amisach.
Has nothing to do with the 3 times it says.
The 3 times it says Ad Elohim Yovid Vashneim.
Right.
That's only in Parsha of Mishpatim, and it's referring only to the Parsha of Shomron.
Okay.
And the whole question was, are there words in the Parsha of Shomron that are referring to Malvan Loiva or not? If there are, then the pasuk is addressing Malvan Loiva as well. And if there aren't, then the pasuk is not addressing Malvan Loiva. Zok Tehillah Gemara Vatra. Nezek v'chati nezek. Frank Gemara, what is nezek? Hanu chavolos. So how is the Mishnah adding now a new category? Echad in imamnis, echad gzelos v'chavolos, and echad nezek. Nezek is just another. It's a component of chavolos. We know when someone is chayvel, he has to pay nezek tzari b'shevas and baishas. Nezek is just one component. Nezek hanu chavolos. Zok to Gemara, you know why the Mishnah stuck in nezek, even though it's redundant? Mishum dekaboy lemishnah chatzi nezek, because the Mishnah wanted to tell us about chatzi nezek. Therefore, tani nami nezek shalim. Chatzi nezek is the chiddush. Frank Gemara, chatzi nezek is not a chiddush either. Chatzi nezek nami hainu chavolos. What is chatzi nezek? It's half of the nezek. So that's weiter the same category. Zok to Gemara, the reason why the Tana wanted to specifically state chatzi nezek is because it's a little different than gzelos v'chavolos. Why? Because Tana mamana, gzelos v'chavolos are mamana. You're paying what your actual damage that you caused was. But Tani knasa and chatzi nezek, you're not really paying for your damages. You're only paying for a knas. Really a short time that shtoises, the buyer should be potter, because there's no reason why he would assume that this is a wild animal that has to be watched. But the Torah counted him by making him pay chatzi nezek. Zok Gemara, that works out very well if that's how you understand chatzi nezek. If you hold pal ganiska knasa, then it makes perfect sense that chatzi nezek wouldn't have been included in chavolos. The Tana needed to tell us chatzi nezek. So once the Tana tells us chatzi nezek, it tells us nezek as well. But if you hold that chatzi nezek is mamina, meaning of course you're liable to watch your animal. You should have known your animal could be wild, and really you should pay nezek shalem. but the chiddush of the Torah is that will wind it back, will only make you pay Chatzi Nezek. But that means Chatzi Nezek is regular Nezek. So why would I need a Tana to tell us specifically that Chatzi Nezek requires a Bezna free? Ma'ikla Meimer. Ella, you're right. It's not because of Chatzi Nezek either. It's Ella Aidi de Kaboy Lemisna Tashlume Kefel, with Tashlume Abav Chamisha, which are surely not moment, they're for surely knas. The moment she'enoi mishtalem b'reish. Moment she'enoi mishtalem b'reish means you're not paying the amount of the damages, you're paying a different amount. And the Rashi speaks out, she'mishalem yoyshev in a keren. When you're paying kefil and dal v'ei, you're paying more than keren. And the chati nezek mishalem pachas min a keren, even though it's still momena, but it pays less than keren, it's not paying the damages. They're all chedushim, not typical cases of paying damages. Therefore, the Mishnah wants to list it. So b'reish hainu keren. Moment hamishtal b'reish means you're paying the actual damages. So since it's moment she'ein mishtal b'reishu, tananami chatzin nezek, the moment she'ein mishtal b'reishu, the idea the kaboy the mishnah chatzin nezek, tananami nezek. So really the chiddush is not chatzin nezek. Really the chiddush is kefil and dal v'hei. But once we mentioned kefil and dal v'hei, where you're not paying the actual damages, we threw in chatzin nezek. Just because it's also something where you're not paying the actual damages. And of course, once you throw in Chatzi Nezek, the Tana threw in Nezek. But really, the main Chiddush of this category is Kefel and Dal V'hei. Shloisha Minola. Where do we know that you need 3 Dayanim? We referenced it very subtly when we talked about the 3 Dayanim, and we referenced by Shmira, but let's actually analyze the Psukim how, to see where you actually see in the Parsha of Shomrim this requirement of 3 Dayanim. Shloisha Minola. The Tana Rabbanan, and let's look up. This is in Parshas Mishpatim, so we might as well look at the Psukim inside, so we'll get a little bit of a sense of the parsha that we're talking about. So it says as follows. This is the parsha of Shomer Chinam. Ki yidin ish el re'eyu kesef oikelim lishmor. Someone gives his friend kesef oikelim, and the Gemara tells us that this is referring to a Shomer Chinam. V'guna v'beisa ish im yimatzeh aganev yishalom shnoi. The Nikra Balabais El Halahim. Balabais has to go to the Dayanim. So here's the first reference of Elohim in the parsha of Shmira, and then the pasuk continues. Al Kol Davar Pesha, Al Shor, Al Chamor, Al Sel, Al Salma, Al Kol Aveda Shayor Mekuzeh. Again, Ad Halahim Yovei Dvar Shneim. So that's the second time it says it, and then a moment later, Asher Yashiyun Elohim Yishalom Shnaim L'Reyehu. So since it says Elohim 3 times, we say it refers to 3 Dayanim. I just want to point out, Asher Yarshion is pronounced Asher Yarshion, but really the way it's pronounced, it's as if there was a Vav in between the Ayin and the Nun, right? Asher Yarshion seems to indicate that we're missing a Vav. It's because Un is pronounced Un because it will be Ayin Vav Nun. That's going to come up later because the Gemara is going to get involved with Kri and Ksiv. So this is definitely read Yarshiun, but the way it's written might not be. It just makes a difference of pronunciation of the word. I'm sorry? It is chaser. That's exactly what it is. Asher Yarshiun is pronounced like it would be spelled with a vav, yet there is no vav there.
So this is a drasha, right? This is a drasha. It's not explicit 3. We learn it out from, right?
I would say that's a drasha, yeah.
So this drasha is considered a deraisa. I just want to be clear on that.
I believe so, yeah. That's the Gemara is saying you need 3 dayanim deraisa because of this.
Okay, but it's not, doesn't say explicitly you need 3 dayanim. It's
right,
just,
a lot
it's
of
woven.
Halachas that aren't said explicitly in the Torah that we do that in drashas.
Yeah. Okay, just want to, and it's still deraisa. Just want to be clear on that.
Yeah, I believe so. Okay, so let's see where we are holding. So Zog to Gemara, let's analyze these psukim. Shloisha minolan, the Tana Rabbanan, v'nikra balabais Elohim, harekan echad, ad Elohim yovid var shneim, harekan shnayim, asher yashin Elohim, harekan shloisha, divri Rabbi Yoshia. This is the shita of Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yonasan Omer, Rabbi Yosy and Rabbi Yochanan are often found together. They were contemporaries. They were from the very, very early Tanoim. As a matter of fact, they used to live in Eretz Yisrael, and when due to the times they had to leave Eretz Yisrael, as they were leaving Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Yochanan left, and Rabbi Yosy, when he got to leave Eretz Yisrael, he said, "You know what, I can't do this," and he turned around and stayed in Eretz Yisrael. So Zok the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan Noimer, Rishon Tchila Nemar, Ve'ein Darshan Tchilos. The first time it says in the pasuk, "V'nikra balabais Elohim," you need that to tell you the pasuk pshat. So you can't use that as a drasha. But Rashi says a little more than that. Tosfos argues, but Rashi is a little more than that. It's not just that you need it for pasuk pshat. You actually need it for something else. Ein darshan tchilos leminyan. You can't count as one of the three, the first one, because it's the first time the Torah mentions it. And the legufay also, you need it legufay, the liboy mumchin. How do you know you need mumchin? By calling a dying God. You know that the Torah is telling us it needs to be mumchin. So therefore, the Elohim lashon gedula v'rabbanos. So you need it to have the first Elohim. So therefore, you can't use that as an extra one to tell me that it's also telling me what the count is. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, I don't see 3 dayanim. I only see 2 dayanim because there's only 2 words extra Elohim. Elad Elohim yovad shneim harei kanechad. Asher yashin Elohim harei kan shnayim. So we're skipping out the first one because the first one is needed to tell you need mumchin, but 2 doesn't work. Vein bezin shakel. Therefore, ma'isifan alayim oidach. And therefore, harei kan shloim. So regardless, midarash you need 3. The question is, did the Torah explicitly state 3? And when I say explicit, I mean through the drasha, like Rabbi Yosy holds, or does the Torah only really tell us 2? And on our own, we have to figure out that you need to default to 3 so that you have an odd numbered bezna. I'm sorry? I don't think so. The nafkamina would be what caused them to come up with this psak and how that would impact other sugyas. So Neima b'darshan tchilos kamivli. Maybe the machlokes between Rabbi Yosy and Rabbi Yosy is just that. When the first time the Torah mentions something, do you say that's needed to teach me the base halacha, and I can't use that as the count, or maybe not? The Ma'aser b'darshan tchilos, which was Rabbi Yosy, Ma'aser Rabbi Yochanan holds ein darshan tchilos. So therefore, you only have 2, and the third comes because you cannot have a bezin shokol. Zakamar loy. That's not necessarily what the machlokes is. Rather, the chula alma ain't darshan tchilos. Let's say nobody darshans tchilos. So that would explain Rabbi Yochanan how you only see 2, and the third is only added because of ein beis and shokol. But how is Rabbi Yosy going to get 3 out of here? Amalach Rabbi Yosy, I'll tell you how I got a third out of here, even though I still need the first mention of bez, because in Cain, name of krav and nikra balabais ala shayfet. The Torah could have, if the Torah just wants to tell you the halacha that you need a dye in a mumcha, it could have said v'nikra balabais ala shayfet. It didn't have to use a lashon of Elohim. Since it used a not a typical lashon, that's extra in and of itself, and it counts as 1 as the 3. By Elohim shmamina liminyana, it must also be telling you that we can use this for the count of 3. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't have that concern, and therefore he also can learn the third out of the first Elohim. It's not an unusual lashon to use Elohim. Like people say, someone who has a mishpat will go to the dayan, and therefore there's nothing unusual about it, and therefore you don't have a limit on 3, only have a limit on 2. So since we have to have a tiebreaker, we add a 3. Frankly, more, so Rabbi Yosy needed all 3. Why did Rabbi Yosy need all 3 for? Doesn't Rabbi Yosy also agree need a tiebreaker? So really, 1 is now extra for him. Rabbi Yosy, less lay best than night, he should have that svar as well. And if he has that svar as well, then why does he need the third Elohim? Now it's an extra word. Vatanya we learned. Rabbi Eliezer ben Nosh Rabbi Yosy Loimer Matamad Loimer Lintois Achia Rabam Lahatos. It says you shouldn't go Achira Lintois, but what you should do is Achia Rabam Lahatos, where we analyzed that earlier to say that the same type of roiv to exonerate is not the type of roiv you need to condemn, right? You need a roiv of 2. That's what we used it for yesterday. But it says in this puzzle, Lintois Achia Rabam Lahatos. Hataya Amra, the Torah is telling us, Aseilecha Bezdin Noite. So you have to make a Bezdin that has an odd number that we can come to a resolution. So are you going to tell me that Rabbi Yosy doesn't agree with the Tana, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yossi, Rabbi Yosy clearly, and he holds you can have an even Bezdin? Zok Gemara, that's absolutely correct. Rabbi Yosy argues on the Rabbi Eliezer, but there's someone else who holds a similar shita to him, and that is Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah. So look, Rabbi Yehuda, Damar Shivim, right? Our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says you don't need to have an odd number. Bezdin of Shivim is enough. You don't need Shivim ve'echad. Ditnan Sanhedrin Gedola, Hoyza Shol Shivim ve'echad. This is what our Mishnah says. But Rabbi Yehuda Aimer Shivim. So you see that you don't necessarily have to have an odd number of people on the Bezdin. Zok Gemara, who said Rabbi Yehuda would tell you that even by a small Bezdin of Mominus, you don't need an odd number? Aimer Deshamas Leila Rabbi Yehuda, Sanhedrin Gedola. Dichsivi Kroy. Maybe Dafka by Sanhedrin Gedola, where it says Es Feli Shivim Ish Miziknei Yisrael, the Torah specifies 70, and that's why it's 70. But for other Batadinim, where the Torah doesn't express a specific number, Bishar Beidina, but other types of Batadinim, Mishamislei, maybe even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that you have to have an odd number. And if you're going to tell me, no, Rabbi Yehuda says across the board, an even number is acceptable, I'll show you Rabbi Yehuda himself in other cases require an odd number for this very reason, to have a tiebreaker. But nan smichas kenim v'arivas egla b'shloisha. Divrei Reb Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'chamisha. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't need 5 dayanim. So the Gemara wants to know, where does this requirement of 5 dayanim come from to Rabbi Yehuda? V'armina my time to Rabbi Yehuda, because it says by egla rufa, and it says by Harel Bavishal Tiber, Smichas V'Samchu Shnayim. It says V'Samchu, that means 2 people. V'Samchu is a plural lashon. Ziknei is also a plural lashon, which is Shnayim. So the Torah talks about 4 dayanim. And Ve'ein Bezdin Shakol Ma'isivin Aleim Oidechot Harekanei. So you see clearly, even Rabbi Yehuda, who by 70 says the even number is acceptable, when it comes to lower numbers, he requires an odd number. So you, Rabbi Yosy, how could you rely upon Rabbi Yehuda and say that you can have an even number? Even Rabbi Yehuda only allows the even number by Shivim, and you want to apply it even to a Bezdin of 3 and allow 2. Zok to Gemara, you're right, that's true. To Rabbi Yosy, Adifah mid Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosy takes a more extreme position than Rabbi Yehuda. Dili Rabbi Yehuda, you were right, it's only by Sanhedrin Gedola who the less lay. It's only by the Sanhedrin Gedola where he allows an even number. Habashar Beidina, but by other Batadinim Isla he requires an odd number. And Rabbi Yosy says no, across the board. Rabbi Yosy Habashar Beidina Nami Leslay. He says there is a problem of shakal. That's why he says you need to add a 5th guy. So we're proving that Rabbi Yehuda holds a Bezim shakal. No, by Shimon, it's because there's a special person. Well, we learned yesterday. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu says "V'asveli shivim ish miziknei Yisrael." But the question is Moshe al Gabeim if he's part of it or not, right? But he held Moshe was not part of the Bezdin; he was just overseer. So at the end of the day, Rabbi Yehuda takes this position only for a Bezdin of 70, and Rabbi Yosy takes the position that you can have an even amount of dayanim even for a lesser Bezdin, and that's why you need a 3rd Elohim to tell me that you need a 3rd dayan. Fact Gemara velahai lintos my avidlei. At the end of the day, we still have a pasuk that says lintos, meaning you have to have an odd number of dayanim so that you can have a tiebreaker. So mukum la b'dinin nefashos. Rabbi Yosy will apply that to dinin nefashos. By dinin nefashos, he will agree that you need 23 dayanim. He's only saying that for dinin mominus, 2 would have been enough if it wasn't for the fact that the Torah tells you need 3. Avol dinin mominus loy. Fact Gemara elahadat nan. Shnayim oimim zakai, ve'echad omer chayiv. If 2 people, 2 of the dayanim said zakai, and the 3rd dayan said chayiv, the halacha is zakai. He's not chayiv. But if shnayim oimim chayiv and only echad omer zakai, that's chayiv. Nemo the loik Rabbi Yosy. This would not seem like Rabbi Yosy. You know why? Because Rabbi Yosy holds that you need a bezin of 3 to paskin. And the Gemara is taking the position is, if you need a bezin of 3 to paskin, all 3 have to have that position. If you only need 3 to break the tie, so then I understand. You only need roiv of the bezdin to paskin. But according to Rabbi Yosy, that you don't need roiv of a bezdin, because if you needed roiv of a bezdin, you'd have to have an odd number. So Vaisach he holds you need a full bezin to paskin. If you need the full bezin to paskin, how do you understand a 2 against 1 situation where we paskin like the 2? Even if you hold like Rabbi Yoshia, we would be able to learn from Dinei Nefashos through a Kal V'chomer that you can also follow the majority, and you don't need a unanimous decision. Ma'isilo b'Kal V'chomer midinei Nefashos. Uma dinei Nefashos Chamiri. Malach dinei Nefashos Chomer. Omer Achman is El Basaruba. The Torah Beferish says that you go Basaroib, right? It says Acharab Lahatos. Dinei Mamonis, like also again, surely by Mamonis, which is not so serious, you should be able to follow the right. Taner Rabban. Dinei Mamonis B'Shloisha. Rabbi Omer B'Chamisha. Why? Kedei sheyigmar hadin b'shloisha. So you see, Rabbi said that it's not enough to have 3 dayanim. You need 3 dayanim to support the psak that we're going to go with at the end of the day. Frag the Gemara, I don't understand. Adu b'tlasa mi loy gamar dina betray. Even if you only have 3 dayanim and it's 2 against 1, you'll have the Gemara din with 2 edim, which is a rive against 1. Why is Rabbi insisting on having the dafka 3 dayanim siding on the winning side? What would be wrong if it was 2 out of 3? This is what Rabbi means to say. By the Gemar din itself, you have to have 3. Alma Kasover, you see that Rabbi's position is Talosa Kiksivi, the Gemar din Ksivi. When the Torah said you need 3 dayanim, if it's from him or if it's from tiebreaker, you see clearly that Rebbe's position is that when the Torah said 3, actually, this would have to be going according to Rabbi Yoshia, that it's because of 3 psukim. It doesn't mean you need 3 dayanim. It means you need 3 dayanim on the side that's going to win. So therefore, you need to have 2 more. But if that's how Rabbi learns, it's going to be a problem. Why? Because Megadav Ba Rabavo. Rabavo was very unhappy with this explanation of Rabbi Shita, that he would actually hold that when the Torah tells you how many dayanim you need, the Torah is not talking about how many dayanim you need to start the case with. The Torah tells you how many dayanim you need to win the case. Elamayata, if that's the case, if whenever the Torah tells you an amount of dayanim, it's not talking about the total bezdin, it's talking about just the amount of dayanim who have to side with the side that wins. Well, then you should need not 70 dayanim, you should need 141 dayanim. Why? So we have at least 71 to paskin in the Torah, based on Rabbi's approach that the Torah is referring to the dayanim who we paskin like. And it should need 45. Why? If 23 dayanim that we learned means 23 dayanim that's going to paskin on the side that's going to win, so then you have to have the other side that's going to be at least 22, which means you would need a bezdin of 25. So that cannot be pshat. The Torah said that Moshe Rabbeinu said, I need 70 people to be the total bezdin. Mishas hasiva shivim. When they're being gathered to sit down to the Torah, the total amount of dayanim are going to be 70. You don't need 70 just on the side of winning. Same thing when it comes to Dinah Mominus. V'shavtu ha'eda v'tilo ha'eda. I'm sorry, that's Dinah Nefashos of 23. V'shavtu ha'eda v'tilo ha'eda nami mishash shvitas ha'eda. You need only to have 23 total. Hachanami v'nikv balabais elolayim mishash kriva shloisha. When they're sitting down to din, you should need 3, not when they're paskening. So that cannot be pshat of Rebbe. So we need to go back to Rebbe. Why does Rebbe require 5 dayanim for a regular case of dinah mominus? The higher time of the Rebbe is because it says Asher Yarshiun Elohim is Trey. Because if you look at Rashi, Yarshiun is a lashon rabbim. If you noticed, Rashi spells Yarshiun with the vav there, right? But if you look it up in the Chumash like we just did, there's no vav there. That's why I pointed that out. So since it's pronounced Yarshiun, 2 people, so Yarshiun Elohim is Trey. And then Nemar Elohim Lamata, Nemar Elohim Lamayla. I'm sorry? Right, the Gemara also has a vav. But it means we're reading it that way. And when it says Elohim by Yarshion, we know it's speaking about 2 dayanim. Therefore, when it says Elohim a second time, we'll also say it applies to 2 dayanim. And if you notice, since we're only using two Elohims, it means we must be working with Rabbi Yonasan and not Rabbi Yoshia. Malamata Shnayim, Avlamayla Shnayim. So that would require 4. The in Bezin Shakal, you're not allowed to have, and even Bezin, Maisifin Aleim Odech. Harekan Chamisha, that's how we reach the total of 5 Dayanim. The Rabbanon argue and say it's only 3 Dayanim because Yarshi'un Ksiv, the way the Torah is written, it's written without a vav. So you don't focus on the way it's pronounced, rather you focused on the way it's written. And now we're going to get into a whole new sugya of Yesh Shem LaMikra, Yesh Shem LaMesaris. Yesh Shem LaMikra means you put the focus on the way it's pronounced. Yesh Shem LaMesaris means you put the focus on the way it's written, and that's going to lead to a whole new sugya. Everyone should have a gewaltige Shabbos. Today is the yahrzeit of the Mezritcher Maggid, who is the main Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, who spread Chassidus, and today is also Yad Kislev, which is a very big day in Lubavitch because it's the day that Baal Tanya got out of jail. So, it's your grandson's birthday also? Oh, Mazel. It's my anniversary. So, Rabbi Yoel Khan, who is the big Lubavitcher, once said that there's 3 Yomim Tovim, Chanukah, Purim, and Yad Kislev, and the greatest of them all are Yad Kislev. Why? Because it says he said over from I think maybe the Mishra Maggid, Rabbi Yoel Khan, who's a big Lubavitcher, and he said over that the 3 days Chanukah, Purim, and Yad Kislev are referring to Yisrael, Vayraisa, the Kodesh Barichu Chadahu. Right. So if you look at the 3 Yom Tovim, Purim was an assault on our Guf. That's Yisrael. Right. Chanukah was assault on the Torah by the Yevonim. That's Vayraisa. So what's left to be against Yad Kislev? The Kodesh Barichu Chadahu. So Yad Kislev is the Eibishter. That's what the Lubavitchers kind of. But it's a very big Yom Tov for the Lubavitchers. But the Mezritcher Maggid was the main person who spread Chassidus. It's a lot of things going on over here, but it's also because of the Mezritcher Maggid, and the Baal Tanya was a Talmud of the Mezritcher Maggid. All the big rabbis, but the Baal Afla, all the big rabbis that spread Chassidus were the Mezritcher Maggid's Talmidim.
There's three biggest young players again are Chanukah, Purim, and Yad Kislev.